Hey, welcome. Today, we are going to go on a little financial adventure. We're going to take a look at a company's financial report, which can seem super complex, and turn it into a story that you can actually follow. And we're going to use a real company to do it. So let's jump right in.
So, have you ever had that feeling? You open up a report and it's just this wall of numbers and spreadsheets and you have no idea where to even start? If so, you are definitely not alone. It can feel like you're trying to read a completely different language, right?
But here is the secret. Every single financial statement tells a story. It's a story about ambition, about struggle, and hopefully a story about success. And I promise, by the end of this, you'll know exactly how to read that story for yourself.
Okay, so first things first, we have to crack the financial code. And trust me on this one, it is way, way simpler than it looks. Honestly, at its heart, a company's big, fancy income statement is really just a souped-up version of a household budget. Seriously. It all boils down to two things: tracking the money coming in and tracking the money going out. That's it. Money in versus money out.
So let's start where any good story does, at the beginning. Let's follow the money that's coming in. We're going to call this the revenue trail.
The very first number you're almost always going to see is something called revenue from operations. Now, for our case study, APL Apollo, this is simply the money they make from doing what they do, which is making and selling steel tubes and pipes. It's called the top line for a pretty simple reason. It sits right there at the top of the statement. It basically tells us how much business the company is doing. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Just look at this growth. Back in the third quarter of 2018, APL Apollo brought in around 13.7 billion rupees. Fast forward to the end of 2020, and a single quarter's revenue is up to 18.8 billion. Okay, not bad. But then look at the first half of 2024, a massive 68.2 billion. That is some serious growth.
And this upward trend is exactly what you want to see. It's a huge, flashing sign that the company is expanding, that people want its products. For an investor, that's exciting. For an employee, that means stability. A growing top line is really chapter one of a great business story.
But just making sales is only half the battle, right? To really figure out if a company's doing well, we have to look at the other side of the coin, the money going out. This is the real cost of doing business.
There's this famous saying in the business world that just nails it. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity. Big sales numbers, they look great, they feel impressive. That's the vanity part. But what really matters for keeping the lights on, the sanity, is what's left over after you've paid all your bills.
So, what kind of bills are we talking about? Well, for a manufacturing company like APL Apollo, the biggest expense, by a long shot, is the cost of materials consumed. This is literally what they have to pay for the raw ingredients to make their products. And in their case, that means steel. Lots and lots and lots of steel. And this chart just puts it all into perspective. I mean, look at this. In the 2020 financial year, a staggering 88.5% of their total costs, almost 90 cents of every dollar spent, went just to buying raw materials. Everything else, paying their people, marketing, loan interest, it's all just a tiny sliver of the pie. This tells you that for this company, the price of steel is pretty much everything.
All right, so we've seen the money coming in and we've seen the money going out. Now it's time for the big reveal, the moment of truth. Let's look at the final score, or as they call it, the bottom line. This is where the plot thickens. You take all that revenue and you subtract all those expenses we just talked about. Sometimes the number you're left with is positive, and, well, sometimes it's not. So let's rewind to a pretty tough moment for our company, the second quarter of 2019.
Oof. Yeah, that was their profit for that 3-month window, a loss of over 34 million rupees. This is the struggle part of the story I was talking about. Maybe steel prices shot through the roof. Maybe sales took a dive. Whatever happened, at that moment, the company was in the red.
But here's the thing. This is exactly why you can't judge a book by a single chapter. Any company can have a bad quarter. The real question is, how do they do over the long haul? So let's zoom out and look at their results for the entire year, ending in March 2020.
And there it is. Wow, a complete 180. Even with that tough quarter, they managed to end the full year with a profit of over 2.5 billion rupees. That's not just a comeback, that's an incredible performance.
Let's just put those two numbers right next to each other, because this is the whole narrative arc right here. They went from a quarterly loss of nearly 3.5 crore rupees to an annual profit of 256 crore. This shows you how resilient the business is, and it tells a much, much better story than that one scary data point.
So, what's the big takeaway here? After this little journey through revenue and costs and profits, what's the one thing you should remember?
Well, it really just boils down to a super simple 3-step checkup you can use on any company. First, check the revenue. Is that top line heading up? Is the company growing? Second, check the expenses. What are the big costs, and do they seem to have them under control? And third, check the profit. At the end of the day, is the business actually making any money?
So the next time you're faced with a financial report, don't just see a wall of numbers. See the story. See the company's ambition and its revenue. See its struggle and the costs, and see the final result in its profit. You now have the tools to figure it all out.
And you know, the best part is that this is really just the beginning. Understanding this is step 1. So the real question for you is, now that you have this skill, what story are you going to decode next? Thanks for watching.